Sundown City. The air was thick with the city's usual smog as Chloe and Jake glided on their electric scooters through the streets, weaving between cars and rows of weathered tent cities under overpasses and lining most of the streets. "I think we should head back," Jake muttered, glancing nervously at the horizon where the sun dipped lower. Chloe shrugged. "We can grab something quick. We're not that far. I'm so hungry, and I know I've seen this place right around here somewhere." Jake squinted at the deepening orange sky, his heart starting to race. "No, it's getting late. We need to go before dark. We have to stick to our curfew. You know what happens when we're late." The city wasn't like it used to be. Once, people roamed freely, the streets full of life. Now, though, after dusk, no one ventured out. Too dangerous. Chloe rolled her eyes but relented. "Fine, let's head back." As they turned around, their scooters hummed softly beneath them, and they passed more of those filthy tents that reeked like wet animals and rotten food. Each one seemed to pulse with an unnatural stillness. Chloe stole a glance at them. Her heart sank. Why had she never noticed how eerie they looked? A chill slithered down her spine. It felt like only minutes had passed when Jake cursed under his breath. "Chloe, look!" She turned, her stomach lurching as she realized the sky had darkened far too fast. It was suddenly night time. "We need to hurry!" Jake's voice wavered with panic. Chloe nodded, her hands trembling as she squeezed the handlebars, pushing the scooter's throttle to its max. Suddenly her scooter sputtered, and the power drained away, leaving her coasting until it stopped dead. She whipped around to see Jake struggling with his own. With no sunlight, the solar-powered scooters had died out. "What the hell?" Chloe began, but the words caught in her throat. All around them, tents began to move. The flaps twitched, then opened one by one as if responding to the darkness. Jake's eyes widened. "Run! Now!" Without hesitation, they abandoned the scooters and bolted down the street, their feet pounding against the cracked pavement, jumping over discarded trash and through abandoned cars. Behind them, the creatures crawled out, shuffling, grotesque, their bodies twisted and deformed, yet once unmistakably human. Their skin hung in strips, their mouths dripping with what looked like dark tar. One by one they rose, driven by hunger, eyes locked onto their fleeing prey. Chloe's breath came in ragged gasps as she glanced back, heart pounding. "They're following us!" she screamed, her legs burning as they raced for home. The creatures moved faster than anything should be able to, their grotesque forms lurching with terrifying speed. The streets became a blur as panic clawed at them, but the creatures were relentless, drawing closer with each second. Chloe suddenly tripped on part of an old broken bicycle, barely catching herself, and screamed, "Ja!" Jake turned around to see her surrounded by 4 or more of the creatures. It was hard to tell with the twisted figures and the surrounding darkness. He quickly ran back to her, swinging his backpack as hard as he could, hitting the creatures away from her, his eyes filling with tears from the adrenaline and fear for his little sister's life. Then he remembered his flashlight. While not strong enough to hurt them, the light would at least make them turn away in time enough for them to get away from her. He pulled it from his backpack, flipped the switch on the side, revealing a blinding beam of light directed at the creatures. It worked. The creatures scattered into dark spaces behind cars and ducked into alleys, giving Jake just enough time to grab Chloe's arm, dragging her back to her feet, but dropping the flashlight in the panic of helping his sister up. There was no time. They had to move fast. "There! Look!" Jake yelled, pointing toward the faint outline of their house just about half a block away, the fence barely visible through the darkness. But before they could even think of safety, more creatures had surrounded them, cutting off every escape route. Just as they thought it was over, the world around them exploded with blinding white light. A loud humming vibration filled the air as enormous floodlights and neighborhood streetlights activated, illuminating the neighborhood like the sunshine of the middle of the day. The creatures shrieked, clawing at their own faces and ripping at their own skin as they scrambled back toward the shadows, fleeing the harsh light. "Dad," Jake gasped, realizing they had made it home without even noticing. The front door flew open and their father stood in the doorway, yelling frantically, "Get inside now!" They had to move quick, as the lights only turn on for 1 minute at a time to conserve the energy it took to use them when needed. 1 minute on, 1 hour off. It was enough to make the creatures run back to the darkness before they could form in enough numbers to break down doors and overthrow the surviving residents. Without thinking, they dashed through the gate and into the safety of the house. Their father slammed the door behind them and bolted it, his face pale and drenched in sweat. Outside, the creatures howled in frustration and pain while running back to the darkness of the city. "What the hell?" their father shouted, his face red with both anger and fear. "I've told you 100 times, you don't stay out after sundown. This isn't some game. You know what's out there. Those things could have killed or infected you. And for what? Because you didn't have the sense to check the very sky above your head. Do you think I'm just making up these rules like I'm on some power trip? Damn it, it's about keeping you alive." His voice cracked as he ran a hand through his hair, the anger fading just enough for his worry to show. "I love you both too much to lose you like this," he said as he looked down at a picture of him, his wife, and both of the kids on the first day of buying their new house outside of the city he once worked in. "Dad, I'm sorry. It was my fault. We just—" Jake began, but was interrupted by his father, saying in an exhausted voice, "Go to your rooms. You need to rest for the morning, and until my broken leg heals, you guys are our only hope of getting day-to-day supplies." Both Jake and Chloe turned away with their heads hung low, upset and somewhat defeated from what had happened. It was stupid. Jake knew better than to let time slip like that. He let his guard down, and it almost cost him his life, or even worse, his sister's. Jake stopped suddenly before passing the kitchen table, reached into his backpack and pulled out half a loaf of 3-day-old bread, a can of peas, and a candy bar. "We saved this for you, Pop. It's not much, but—" Before he could finish, his father turned to him, his eyes filled with tears, and said, "No, you guys eat it. I'm sure you worked up an appetite after all of that, and I don't want you going to bed hungry." Jake and Chloe ran to their father, embracing him while crying and shaking, knowing each other were truly all they really had left. Later that night, in the safety of her room, Chloe sat on her bed, staring blankly out the window as another minute of streetlight illuminated the neighborhood. "It's over," she whispered, her voice hollow. "Things will never be the same again." Jake stood in the doorway, arms crossed, trying to keep his voice steady. "I know it seems that way, but maybe this is the worst of it. You know, if we stick to the curfew, stay mindful of how far we go, maybe things will get better if we just stick to the routine and rules just right." Chloe didn't respond at first. She could hear the nervous hope in her brother's shaky words. She just kept staring out the window. Finally, she turned and glanced at him, eyes glazed over, a weak smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Yeah, maybe." She turned back toward the window, staring at the blacked-out city in the far distance, just making out the faded howls of the creatures. Slowly her gaze drifted down to her arm. There, hidden beneath her sleeve, was a bite mark, torn and fresh, pulsating with a black tar-like substance in the teeth marks. The infection had already begun. Minute over. Lights out.